Welcome to another edition of the MYB Cast, a podcast devoted to educating our followers to alternatives for self-care and wellness through the somatic world of our mind-body connection. Today, we're featuring another episode of our series, Portraits of the Pioneers. Portraits of the Pioneers is an in-depth look at those that have been actively involved in the exploration, development, and practice of somatic touch therapy since its early inception. I'm Richard Mack, and I'm here with my co-host Anna Marie Bowers. And today, Anna Marie and I are honored and excited to have Kathryn Hansman-Spice as our guest.
Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you.
Well, Kathryn brings an in-depth experience in her fields of early childhood education, massage therapy, mindfulness, trauma, and brain science. She was honored to study directly with Milton Traeger, who guided her personal development. Her practices and teaching is inspired by the power of compassionate touch, presence, and body awareness to wire our brains for greater wellness and resilience. That says a lot. Welcome, Kathryn. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Why don't you start by just giving us a little bit of an idea about how you got into somatic education from early childhood education? What's your story? What's your story there?
Burnout.
Burnout.
Yes. And I think it was the greatest gift that happened to me. In my 30s, I was, trying to do it all. I was married. I was directing early childhood programs. I was passionate about Jean Piaget and learning theory, and I was traveling a lot to teach about it. And I was working mostly in inner city work, working with, at the time, they called it the disadvantaged child, unfortunately. But we were working in how, where people lived, the family, the culture, the level of economics was shaping the child development. And my graduate school set up a program on 42nd Avenue near Times Square. So we were working with Hell's Kitchen. So I loved that work, and I just really felt like it was really important. But I think what I see now is I didn't have any tools of self-care. I thought as a woman, I could do it all. And I could manage and balance it. And I don't think I paid a lot of attention to myself. So I really started having severe back pain. And I eventually, I think at that time I was directing a bilingual multicultural daycare center in Washington, D.C. And it just had a lot of moving parts, and especially different cultures together. So I just found out that, I don't know, I guess my stress just got bigger and bigger, and I was not paying much attention to it. So I really was sort of immobilized with back pain one day. And that changed my life, because this was in the middle of the 1970s in Washington, D.C., where massage was considered sex and chiropractors were quacks. So we talk about the foundations of somatic work and what was going on at that time. But while I was kind of winding down and thinking I needed to retire from early childhood, I met a nurse who was entering this new massage program in Washington, D.C., PMTI, which is still there. And it was sort of introduced me to a whole nother way of life. I thought I was going to, I don't know, learn how to help other people by touching rather than by developing early childhood programs. But what I really found out was I was learning to touch me and to really learn to listen to me and know anything about me. So I have this baseline of, oh, this was me when I knew nothing about self-care. And then I happened in this massage school that I'm sitting at the foot of this pioneer, Kevin Andre, who set up this school. And he's saying things like, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to do nothing. And I remember not having a clue what he was talking about, because I was all about doing and making it happen. And I was making it happen to the detriment of my own health. So this became like, huh? And then I remember crying getting my first foot massage, because I've always had problem feet. Well, this just became this opening and a whole new world. So I wound up teaching in the school and being on the board and eventually directing it. So I took my early childhood skills and applied it to the bodywork field in terms of teaching, directing, doing all that stuff. So that really was the opening to there was a more holistic way to look at myself, and that I needed to, I guess the phrase I love is I learned to come home to myself and sense of I was being touched. I was learning that I was under stress. I was learning about my back pain. And so here's this new vision. Oh my goodness, more of a mind-body connection. And I remember going to a lecture at Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. with Candace Pert as having written her book, Molecules of Emotion, talking about how hard it was as a female scientist and talking about stress. And
What year was that, Kathryn, roughly?
that was probably 70. Well, no, maybe it was, I'm looking away as I'm thinking about time. Maybe it was the early 80s. But I remember being just so, at the time, the relaxation response was a big thing. Learning about relaxation was so important. Energy was considered a kind of a no-no word. Candles, energy work, it's woo-woo stuff. And I myself knew nothing about any of that. But people like John Upledger came to our school and taught us about cranial sacral work, and he didn't even have his institute yet. PMTI was maybe one of 5 massage schools in the country that was really well known and developed, and we were developing the council schools, putting, this way for massage schools to come together. I mean, this was heady times in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And
A lot
the
going
American
on.
Massage Therapy Association was just getting going, and we were meeting to define what massage was, and did it include Traeger and shiatsu, and what was the umbrella for this world? And somatics was not the word that came up then.
Yeah.
Was
And
it
that was
all
one of the
considered
things
to
that,
be like, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, was it all kind of under the umbrella of massage back in the day?
Well, that's what massage wanted, and I think we didn't have another alternative. So we were trying to define massage as this broad concept that included everything.
Right.
And I don't know when Thomas Hanna wrote his book where he talked about somatics, but I know that word was around then, but not really used. And so as states tried to define massage, and they tried to name it and shape it and be under the law, it got very confusing. Even now, just only recently, Traeger got exempted from massage laws in Oregon. Well, they're not all the same, and massage is different from some other body work. But at the time, I mean, we were meeting in big conferences to answer that question.
Yeah.
So.
And still meeting right now because it's an ongoing effort by the Federation is working with the collaborative connection of the structural integration people, Feldenkrais, Traeger approach people, and a myriad of other mind-body connections in trying to make the case that this is not massage. And I do understand that you're trying to regulate people that are touching people so that you have a way of understanding what's going on. But this is graduate school. I mean, it's one thing to understand the anatomy of a body, which massage people do, but there's another thing to be able to talk to the body, and that's what we do. And that's a different world.
So in the 70s in New York, was it difficult to get clients I mean, massage schools were opening. How difficult was it to reach out to the public back then and help them understand the benefits of what you were offering?
Well, at this time I was in Washington, D.C., but
DC, sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you have to realize at that time there were yellow pages, and the yellow page had massage and escort service under the same category. So we had to fight to separate that, just to have not be advertised under an escort service.
Yes.
So we had to train every massage student how to answer a call that might be really someone wanting a more sexual experience.
Right.
Wow.
So we had to, it was defining the time, defining the work at the times. And I remember that it was prostitutes that first came to the massage school because they wanted to be legitimate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting little tidbit.
Late 1970s. But
So how did you develop your practice? Did it
that's a
start
good
then?
question. I remember my first check was for $35. Not framed somewhere, but it probably should have been. Well, I think the way I did it was I was one of my second graduate degrees in family and community development. So I was very interested in how, not the individual, but the context and how we do things through the community and build early childhood support systems. And so people before me at PMTI had already started some outreach and community outreach, but I kind of probably formalized it more. But we created, basically, I advertised by being in the community.
Okay.
If I
So
was
were you,
out at a health fair and set up and giving seated massage, which wound up being seated Traeger, um, I realized one reason I switched to Traeger was I realized everything I taught was about Traeger, not about massage. So, or I took the students out to like a refuge house where abused women were hiding, but we were going in there and touching the mothers and the children. Or we were going to the hospice and touching the nurses and all the staff who were working so hard. Or so how by bringing touch to the community, I was known, you know. And
it
so
is one of the things that I have always admired about your work is how much the community involvement is a part of what you do and how that outreach to the community is about what you do. And so I wondered if that started way back then or if that
yeah.
gradually became how you operated. But
Well, and it was important. One thing we did was we created satellite little community education programs all over the city. So we called it the short course, which is a stupid title, but it was an introduction to massage. And so one night we'd just be doing hands and people could be fully clothed and we had back chairs sitting on the floor. And um, by teaching little courses all over town about just how to touch your partner, or how to touch Byron, my husband at the time, you both knew, I'm sure.
yeah.
We set up a couples massage class. So we were just, because we found that if two people came into a workshop, and didn't know each other, they got along better than the people who knew each other. So,
Mhm.
you bring all
I'm
your
not surprised.
you bring all your relationship questions here. And so
Of
we wound up
course.
having a class to teach what the perfect touch was. And the perfect touch was what your partner wanted, not
Mhm.
what you liked. Isn't that
Yeah.
revolutionary? Teach,
Yeah.
listen to your partner. And so that really became a big way we advertised.
Mhm.
Was it pretty well received?
Oh, yeah, we had a big, and I still think that. I still at 81 think, what community course can I set up? Because I think that's really where it happens. It's face to face and it's personal, and people can feel the difference of, I guess I get excited about that moment when someone really feels what it feels like to feel good,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
have someone just have brushed their shoulder and stroke
Yeah.
their arm and it feels different. Oh my God.
Mhm.
There's another
Mhm.
way of being.
Yeah. Sounds like you already met Milton Traeger at this point, because those are some of the words that he would use.
Yeah, I can't separate that from me now, but I met him probably in 80. Kevin Andre, the school director, brought Milton, and we had the ballroom in the Sheraton Hotel was filled with people there to see Milton.
Mhm.
So that was amazing. Probably
About what year?
83, maybe 83, something like that.
Okay.
But I didn't really connect to him that much in the beginning. He's kind of a gruff guy, and I don't know. I didn't just instantly fall in love with that, but there was a little local conference, and I won a session with Milton. So I had to travel to California to get it, and I had to deal with his wife Emily about she wanted me to just be touched in the workshop in the training, not privately. I thought, well, I want a private session. I want that. And that's where the first learning from Milton happened, because in that session, I'm thinking I had this chronic shoulder problem. I still deal with it. I thought, I'm going to the master, you know. Finally, someone will meet me and, take this away. After a little while, he got me off the table and he stood me at the side of the table and he taught me how to pause.
That's powerful.
I was revved up and, that was my modus operandi then. And he just went right to it.
What
You
did
need
that
to find
feel
some
like?
space in your life.
What did that feel like when you experienced that?
Well, it was very unsettling. He was challenging my pattern, which was, I'm good at being busy and getting things done, but that was at the detriment to me. And I kept learning that lesson over and over and over. But when what he modeled was standing at the side of the table, feeling my feet, shifting weight, taking a breath. That's what was important. That was finding me.
Mm-hmm.
And he had almost no words about it, I don't think. I don't remember being talked to by him. But then many, many times you're with Milton in a training, and what he does, he comes and you go up and he touches. He still does it, right? He touches your hand. He touches it. He says, go share it with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
What? What am I sharing? What'd you do? I mean, do I do this? Do I do this? Do I do this? And he's just saying that. Just share that.
Mm-hmm.
And it took you to some place you didn't know in yourself to have to be that simple. So that was always his gift. And I just have to mention in honor of my dear Byron, who's been gone 5 years now. Byron, after having been in the trauma center here when he had fallen, he came back, was in a little class I was teaching. And there was a young man there who was a massage therapist. And he went up to him and held his hand. He did what Milton did, without words. This guy, tears come down. To be met at that level with presence and doing nothing. Going back to the guy sitting at, the feet of the massage school director. And sometimes the most powerful thing you do is nothing. So I kept learning that from Milton. And I saw the Milton who did big movements, but when you felt Milton, it didn't feel too big for you.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at it and, oh my God, that's neck. Well, for that neck, it worked. My neck, I think he was going, let go, in invitation, because I didn't know anything about letting go of my neck. But that art of just being there, and it's still what's important to me is, will a client go away feeling that someone, as you said, we talk to the nervous system, but we're also receiving from that nervous system. So it's a dialogue. And that dialogue that says to that person, I'm here to be with you. I'm here to get to know you. I'm not here to change you. Just something, you go into this deep parasympathetic place, and that's where change happens. Unless we can feel safe enough to let go at that level, the body's not receiving the gifts we have to offer, I think.
And I don't even think the parasympathetic state was even anything that meant anything to anybody at that time.
Well, we did, the model then was very much, it's sympathetic or parasympathetic. You're either
Mhm.
relaxed or you're stressed. But that's why I've gotten so much in the polyvagal theory, because at least as a beginning, I'm sure it's not the end of what we know about the nervous system, but that there's more than the parasympathetic is more complicated than that. And we now
Mhm.
know about the vagus nerve. I never heard of the vagus nerve before. Maybe we
Mhm.
named it in some chart. I don't know. But the idea that now I can envision this network of nerves along, and the vagus nerve is going from my brainstem to all my organs and in between, and that I can shape what happens with that. I mean, that's what I think has changed so much with
Absolutely.
understanding.
Absolutely. Yeah. So,
In terms of your own self-care, I'm just curious to expand a little bit, hear a little bit more about the polyvagal theory, and your research and things in terms of self-care too.
Is that's a question?
Yes, kind of. Have you,
What have I, how does this
yeah,
fit with
is
my self-care?
yeah, how did it because coming from massage and all of these different modalities, I guess this is kind of where my question was. Sorry, it wasn't clear. Coming from massage and all of these different modalities, the people in and out of the PMTI at that point in time, the language that we now have to describe the nervous system and neuroplasticity and all of these things that you've done so much research into, we didn't have that language back then. So were you able to discover on your own, oh, these are some things I can also do to take care of myself, as well as your outreach to the community, to the client? I guess I'm kind of looking at that
Yeah.
aspect.
Well, I think it's all about being anchored in myself. And I think that the polyvagal theory gives a different language around the nervous system. Deb Dana talks about anchoring, that you anchor in the parasympathetic, but in the polyvagal theory, you're anchoring in ventral vagus, because that's the part of the parasympathetic nervous system that's bringing us into a calm state of aliveness and connection. But there's other parts of the parasympathetic nervous system that are bringing us into a quieter place. And I mean, into maybe even almost a depressed place. So I think the self-care for me has come.
and I want to hear more about that, because this is how I actually really got to meet Kathryn, is when I was in 2022 taking your course about this.
Mhm.
And you introduced me to Deb Dana and
Mhm.
that whole work. But I want to talk about that more in depth a little bit
Sure,
later on.
sure.
But kind of getting back into this, you're now coming from massage now into the early stages of the somatic world that is just formulating. How much time did you spend with the Traeger, with Milton, the Traeger approach, the whole thing? I have to, I can only guess that it severely changed the way you worked with people.
Yeah.
And the
Duh.
answer can't be that simple, can it? Right.
Uh, well, my mind goes so many places, I almost lose your question.
That's okay.
Well, I was thinking back to the the self-care, because I think, without going into depth about the polyvagal theory, that it's being able to name what state of mind I'm in makes all the difference for my self-care. And
Got
that's
it.
being able to notice, am I anxious? Am I depressed? Am I excited and open? And just having gone through a hip surgery, I really got to feel that. I could really see how I could notice better than I used to how I'm feeling. And sometimes I was feeling pretty bad, and down and restricted. And it was very emotional not being able to move.
I'll bet. I'll bet.
So being able to say, oh, that's where I am. Oh, I just need to be quiet today. I'm feeling, so I can notice where I am, and I can shift where I am with my tools. And so Traeger is one of those tools I have that I think it's the grounding of what I have, because I certainly have studied so many other things. But And the Traeger philosophy is not that very different from what PMTI taught us. It's about attuned listening. It's not just doing effleurage or sweet. It's all about listening to this body and what it wants. And so I came from that early on with the massage training I had. And even people I meet from PMTI now, all those years later, there's still a core of a philosophy there that's anchored in respect for the body, respect, tuning into that person, accepting them where they are, and offering them new possibilities, invitations of where they might go. That's very different from the medical model, as we know, and different from some forms of body work that I certainly experienced and welcomed at the time. To have an elbow in my shoulder and I could feel it release. And I also felt later on it totally contract again because it was too fast, too much. So I could see in my own body that the subtlety of inviting me to let go is where I changed, not when you told me where to go. So I loved it at the time. I said, oh, thank God someone's touching that spot that's so tight. But
Right.
it would relax and then just say too much and contract, and I was worse off.
Interesting. That's where the re-education aspect comes in around the idea of the tension in the body that we're holding. It's the muscle basically just contracting, but it's contracting because it has a pattern being sent from the brain that's saying contract. And the muscle spindles are saying, well, nobody's telling me otherwise, so I guess this is good to go, and we're going to stay with this until
Right.
somebody comes in and starts using the soft tissue as that way back into the brain through the nervous system to say, what could be lighter? What could be softer? And then that re-education starts to take hold, and then a new pattern comes in. And long and behold, more movement, more ease. That is what I feel is a big important part of the whole somatic work that we do today.
Yeah, and I think the foundation of that is what I lacked in the very beginning. That's that baseline of body awareness. Did I have any? No. Was the world talking about yoga or relaxation or no? So that wasn't, I mean, we're surrounded by those messages now in a different way. But still we seem to
Exactly.
take, you know, but still somatics becomes still this framework of it's the mind-body communication. Traditional medicine may say where the brain is separate from the body, but we know it's not. Milton knew it was connected. He didn't have the same language. But that's where I've come from, that neuroscience and everything I've learned just affirms what Milton modeled. And then, so he already knew it without knowing he knew it. He didn't have that language, but he knew that every movement, every touch was a new message to the unconscious mind. And that was the only thing that was important, that they get new feeling experiences. But then you have to repeat them. And that's where some of my curiosity now is people come in and get a wonderful session of any kind of body work and not change an ounce or change for a little while and go back to the pattern. So I'm just intrigued with what is it we know about the brain and how it harnesses its ability to change, that we can make it more likely that somebody will actually change a new way of being, find lasting change.
Wow.
That's hard.
That is hard. I would like to propose that we open a second episode because we try to keep these sessions around 30 minutes, and that's about where we are. So I'm going to invite our audience to stay tuned because episode 2 is about to come up. So, Kathryn, we'll meet you on the other side. Thank you.